Hello, hello. Welcome, good morning. My name is Nick Ferraro. I work for Salesforce IT. I'm a software engineer building mobile apps. Today I want to talk to you about how Salesforce IT goes about building apps. It's a little different than what is in your pamphlet. Last minute title change, I apologize, but the content is pretty much the same. So let's start out with the good old safe harbor. Don't make any purchasing decisions on anything I say. I'm full of it. Anything I talk to you about today will be public information, so you've been warned. So the question is, how do we build apps? It's been something I've been asking myself ever since I was tasked with this presentation. And I had quite a hard time defining it because we don't even know how we build apps. Which is odd because we've built some pretty spectacular apps, so we must know something. And then it kind of hit me that it's because our process is always changing. And that's where I think our success really lies, is that we're not stuck in one process, one technology, a single framework, a single mindset. It's the evolutionary process that has made our apps so fantastic. So maybe a better title is how Salesforce IT goes about building apps. Because I think it's fundamentally overlooked, the process, and everyone wants to choose that new silver bullet framework or library. AngularJS, NodeJS, React. I mean, these are big, awesome frameworks, but they're not going to solve your problem, right? Your process is. So let me start out with an ego-laden fact. We do build awesome apps. It's in our team charter, actually, number one, right after trust, because Salesforce takes trust very seriously. Every app we build, we try to take it to the next level. I'll give you some examples here. Our first app is a native iOS app called Ticks. It allows us to manage and create cases from our mobile app. But that's fairly easy. That's standard, right? You got a list of your cases, you can create new ones. But we had a problem, and the problem was that, like most of you, you probably have some kind of a routing mechanism to put it into a specific queue of who's going to handle it. And we have 800 unique routes that our users had to manually select through, which is crazy, because they weren't always well understood. And most of the time, they'd end up in the wrong queue, about 25% of the time. Which was somewhere around 50,000 tickets a year. It's 50,000 tickets that are going to the wrong queue, sitting there, and then wasting our help desk time rerouting it. So what we did is we built an artificial intelligence system using a naive Bayes algorithm that pulled all the tickets from the last year and was able to take your subject line of, I lost my badge, and predict the top 5 routes for you. And it was 92% accurate. Right? A little bit better than the 75% manual entry. So we kicked that one up a little bit, and we've had huge success with that. Another app that we wrote is called Rooms. I'm sure plenty of you have had issues when you're in a big company trying to find a conference room. We have the same. So we built this app to show you all the conference rooms around you based on your GPS location. But again, kind of easy. You can select the date, time, filter it down to a building or something. We said, you know what if we could tell exactly where you are and automatically set your filters for you? So we did some research, and it turns out that we did have an API that we could access that would tell us exactly where you were, what building and what floor you were on, based on the MAC address that your phone was connected to, assuming you're on Wi-Fi. And so now, as soon as you open the app, it immediately shows you the floor you're on, the building you're in, and a list of rooms near you that you can book immediately. At this point, we got away from our native apps and started going with Salesforce1 apps. Salesforce1 wasn't out when we first wrote the first two, but it was for org chart. And org chart isn't special so much feature-wise as it is just kind of delightful. Right? It's got a nice little fan action as you click somebody to see their direct reports. You can jump to a list view. You can slide left and right for your peers, call and email them right away. And this one was actually pretty popular with our customers, which it's unavailable to them, but hopefully we can change that soon. Then we revamped Ticks. Right? We wanted to get away from native. We wanted to show the power of Salesforce 1. So we kind of reskinned it, put it in Salesforce 1. Everything else is the same. And when I talk to you about the architecture, you'll see how easy that actually was based on how we split up the APIs. And then the newest one we're working on right now, a little sneak peek, is called Concierge. Originally, Concierge was supposed to replace our intranet. But that's a big problem, or it's a big challenge. And so we kind of scaled it back and said, what if we could just answer questions? What if you could ask any question you want and get an answer? And those answers are curated, voted upon, you can flag them. You can get better responses the next time you use it just because you used it this time. So that's in development. But I think these apps are fairly awesome, and there's definitely room for improvement. We've got our sights on the horizon for some great features to add on. But the question remains, how did we build these? Right? The first key thing, which I didn't even think about pointing out until a colleague of mine said that people often overlook it, is we work hand in hand with our UX team the whole way. It's not throwing something over the wall, asking them for a design, they throw it back, and we try to implement it and say this and this and this won't work. Every step of the way, we are seeing new diagrams, new images, new graphics, animations, alternate routes through the app. We're having discussions with our UX team. And we're able to build these apps the right way the first time and make them awesome. The other thing we do is we don't build an app around a specific technology. Right? And this, you've heard it a million times, when you have a hammer in your tool set, everything looks like a nail. Right? Or like I like to say, if you have a Java developer, don't let them make the architecture because it'll all be Java. And that might not always be the right solution. You need to pick the technology that fits what you want to do with that app. Now, there's obviously a cost to learning a new technology every single time. And it's up to you to analyze that and figure out whether the benefits outweigh the cost. But if you do, if you check it out every time, I think you'll find that switching technologies isn't as big a hurdle as you originally thought. And if you had a good architecture behind it from the get-go, you can have something up in a matter of months. So I want to revisit the first two apps I told you about, Tix and iOS, and kind of the challenges we faced and how we went about figuring out how we wanted to build these. For us at Salesforce, we have multiple orgs. I'm sure many of our clients have multiple orgs. And the problem is that our users' data is spanned out across those orgs depending on the type of data you want. Your contact record, personal information might be in one org, your tickets and your cases in another, your skills and your biography and kind of a history of your talents and skills, maybe in a third. And sometimes we need to aggregate those together. And in fact, for Tix, I think our cases span 4 orgs. So how we solved that was kind of your standard architecture here. We got a native app on the left. It does OAuth with Salesforce there using the mobile SDK. Right? So we didn't rewrite that. We just used what's out there. Once it gets an auth token, it's able to stay authenticated through the refresh token, as we're all familiar with. And then this is where we kind of stumbled for a little bit and figured out the best solution. We could have the user auth against every single one of the orgs it needed to talk to, right? And then just manage all of those refresh tokens and kind of make it a thick client, talking directly to 4 or 5 orgs, however many you want, creating tickets, pulling them down, aggregating them on the phone. But it just didn't make sense, because if we add orgs, we got to go update the app, users got to sign in again. Imagine their token gets revoked on all 4 orgs. They got to sign in 4 times again. So we came up with this kind of middleman, which we call the facade. It's running in Java. It can be anywhere, somewhere like Heroku. And we created a nice, simple API that we could access. So we're just sitting here pinging the facade, saying, hey, give me my tickets, create a new ticket, here's some information. And the facade does the heavy lifting. It figures out which org it needs to talk to, or maybe all of them. Another thing this alleviates is if your users want to be able to talk directly to an org, they have to be given access on that org, which means every employee in our company, 10,000 plus, has to be given permission to hit the API, which can be a little dangerous. As soon as they have access, if they're smart enough, they can get that token and do whatever they want. By introducing the facade, we only need one user. That user has access to all of these orgs. It also provides a nice middle ground, a nice firewall between our mobile apps and the orgs. We can do IP whitelisting. We can allow non-VPN clients to talk to our VPN backend. We can do all sorts of things with that facade now, and the client doesn't have to be any smarter. So the facade sits there and talks, and comes back, and our app can run. But then came along Salesforce1. Like I said, Salesforce1 wasn't around when we first started building apps. In fact, when we first started building apps, it was the age-old war of mobile native versus hybrid versus web. And at that time, other big companies such as Facebook, LinkedIn, were all, diving straight in, saying HTML5 is it. And then 6 months later, no, pull out. It's not ready. It's too hard. The tools aren't there. It's going to be there, but not yet. And so we kind of took that cue and said, you know what, let's go native. Or at the very least, hybrid. So we did our due diligence and checked it out, and native was it. But then Salesforce1 comes in. It's a super powerful platform. Right? We can have all of our apps now in one place, in the left-hand nav bar. We can go back to building web apps. And in the 2 years before this was out, the mobile web has come a long ways. We got Angular, we got React, we got Famous, Meteor, we got Ember, we got Node, Backbone. And they let us do what we wanted to do from the get-go without having to worry about browser support and handling events and binding to data. They do all of that for us. So we decided, it's our goal to prove how powerful this platform really is. We're no longer going to build mobile apps natively. We're going to build mobile apps on the web. And we can now support iPhone and Android and Windows 8 and any other device that supports Salesforce1. So we're going to eat our own dog food, or I suppose I'm supposed to say we drink our own champagne. I'm not a fan of champagne, so I'd probably eat the dog food, but we use Salesforce1. So let's see how that changes our architecture a little bit. Instead of our native app, it's Salesforce1 as the native app. And it's still going to auth against an org, a single org, all right, a single org, and pull back those auth credentials. And then instead of loading our native app using Visualforce and Canvas, we can load our app from anywhere. In this case, we load it off of Heroku, which is running NodeJS. Our app gets loaded. We're building single-page apps. That app needs to query the facade. It pings Heroku. Heroku is a proxy with a pass-through to kind of get around the cross-origin request sharing, CORS issues that some of you might know about. Talks to facade. Exact same API. We didn't have to change anything there. All we did was build our front-end mobile app, put it up on Heroku. And then facade, once again, marshals it out to all of the orgs that we need to talk to, figures out what kind of response we need, comes all the way back to us. Now, you might be wondering, why do we have two middlemen? Couldn't we put the front-end app on the facade and send it across? And the answer is absolutely. There's no reason to split this up. Or actually, there is. Doing it this way, we can iterate on both pieces individually. Our facade team working in Java can update APIs, reversion them, do huge refactor work, and it's not going to affect the front end at all. The front end can build as many apps as they want. They're just consuming another API. Deployment is no longer an issue. Facade, a little bit tougher to deploy. Heroku, not too bad. Our Node.js, we can just upload that as many times. And because it's hooked into Salesforce1 Canvas, the next time you go to that page, it pulls down the newest updated piece. But how did we come up with NodeJS, AngularJS? Right, this is what we're building with right now. And really the only answer is we wanted a full JavaScript stack. Right? Node.js acts as a little server for us, proxy things through to the facade. AngularJS is the heavyweight champion that we're using to build our apps, our single-page apps. But like I said, there's Backbone, and there's Ember, and there's React, and there's Famous, and there's Meteor, and probably a bunch of others that didn't make this slide because I ran out of space. But they all solved the same problem. For us, when we dove into this, we did look at each of these. Famous and React are both Vue libraries. Right? They make no claim to being a full stack service. They say, you know what, we're going to do the UI. We're going to let you build web components, similar to Polymer. And we're going to make it fast. Right? I think both of these use a virtual DOM so that they only update the piece of the DOM they need to instead of just doing a full refresh. Famous has a really impressive game-like engine behind it that guarantees 60 frames per second on all your apps, mobile. Backbone and Ember, on the other side of the spectrum, are full stack, but they're definitely more bare bone. Right? They kind of require you to come in and kind of set up your configuration, say, this is how I want to do things, this is how I want to template and do services, here's my architecture. And for us, Angular was right in the middle. It was kind of that perfect middle ground. Right? We hadn't really played with any of these. We said, Angular comes with everything we need. It's full stack. It's got directives so that we can build these web views, these web components. It's got services. It's got controllers that we're familiar with, a great controller scope chain. And it's testable. Right? It was built to be tested. And we should definitely test all of our apps. So that's how we settled on Angular. And I'm not saying it's the perfect solution. Right? It's solved our problems thus far. But we're still playing around with Famous, thinking about Backbone. Maybe now that we have our apps out, it'd be worth going in and doing a little bit more custom configuration on the back end. Maybe, maybe not. But we took the time to look into it. Before I go any further, a couple things to watch out for if you do go down this similar route. Currently, the back button in Salesforce 1 doesn't play well with single-page apps. Right? Single-page apps, they change the view, change the URL, but they don't actually refresh the page. They do kind of this fake refresh where they just update the DOM. Similar, HTML5 history.back and push state, a little funky. But our team didn't just sit back and say, well, whatever. We'll kind of work around it and just deal with it. Right? If it's a problem for us, it's a problem for our customers. Right? And technically, my customer is Salesforce because I build internal apps. But I'm always thinking about our real external customers. If it's useful to us, it's useful to you guys. So we find the team responsible for S1, and we get the bug in place, and we figure out, how soon can you get this up and fixed? Do you need any help from us? Here's some debug logs. Here's how to recreate it. Right? We're constantly trying to not only improve our apps, our specific apps that we've built, but all of Salesforce's apps. Another issue, routing, state, composing multiple web apps on the same server on Node.js is a little bit more back-end. You can say the back-end to the front end. They've got great libraries for that to fix that. A big one, Android 4.3 or less. Before Android 4.0, the embedded web view is the old, crappy, just Android web view. Which means since Salesforce 1 is using that web view, we don't get all the benefits of the Chrome browser, which understands more CSS, better JavaScript, better performance. Again, we looked into this, and it's a pain to get Chrome in as an embedded web view in 4.3. 4.4, added by default. All your embedded web views are now Chrome browsers. So our app started to work. And then iOS, I think 7.06, 8.02, I don't know. Every single time they release something, just a little bit changes, just enough to break one piece, one little style, a click event. So make sure you test it on every version that comes out. We have several phones with every version all the way back to 6, I believe, just to make sure that all of our customers can use our apps. Now, I told you I wanted to talk about how we went about doing it, and it's an evolution. But how do you evolve? We don't wait for it to kind of hit us in the face and say, this isn't going to work anymore. We need to completely redo everything. From the very get-go, we're looking future, pie in the sky, what would be the perfect scenario? What would be the perfect architecture to solve this? How could we build the best apps so that when things change, we're just popping pieces out and putting new ones in? We do this through Brownbags, Tech Talks, Genius Talks, training, whatever you guys want to call them, which are little meetings where our group gets together and somebody tells us something new. Let's visit Java 8. Here's how to build a web component in React.js. Anything. And you don't have to be an expert in it. This is the greatest part. You just have to know a little bit more than the rest of the team. Because that knowledge sharing is extremely valuable. We'll be in the middle of building apps, and we'll do a tech talk on directives, advanced directives, how to build a true blue directive that can be shared with everybody else, isolated scope. And we'll look at that and say, yeah, that's how we want to do things. Should we refactor? Should we just start building it in right now? And we decide right then and there, how much is this going to cost us to do where we're at? Is there a way we can sort of implement it now so that it kind of slowly cascades in? The other thing that we have is our product owner and project manager support. And this is critical. If they're not going to give you the extra time to look into these topics, then you're going to be stuck using whatever technology you know. Another thing you need is just curiosity and motivation. You need a team that wants to do better. They want to do better things. We have PT on, hackathons, technical spikes. Let our team just kind of go wild with something they have in the back of their head, something they want to build. So the question is, what's next? Where is our pie in the sky? What are we trying to get to? And the first one is shared web components. Right? We're building AngularJS apps, which means we're using open source libraries. And these libraries have been extremely valuable for us. Why can't we share what we're building with the rest of you? Can we give back to the open source community? And the answer is yes. How? We're still trying to figure that out. What's the best thing we can give you as far as libraries, services? The second one, sort of a new term. Some of you might have heard of it. It's called the Living Style Guide. Salesforce has an online style guide that shows you how to build a Salesforce1 themed app. They say if you want to build an app that kind of feels like it belongs in Salesforce1, here's some colors you can use. Here's some icons. Here's what the page typically looks like if you have a contact with their name. Here's the styles to use. And we're actually using that on our apps. The problem is, it's not easily consumable. Well, you can't just say, oh, I want a dependency on this. Bower install Salesforce1. So we're working with our UX team to make that a reality. But that's just sharing a style guide. A living style guide means the minute our UX team says, it's not font 15 pixels, it's actually 16, that looks better. They put out an update, you guys get the update. You don't have to do anything on your app other than allow it to have the newest, greatest version of whatever dependency you're relying on. I said our org chart was a very popular app. Lots of customers saying, how do I get that? And why not? It looks great. Everybody needs an org chart. Right? You need to know how many people are ahead of you before you become CEO. How can we share that? How can we make it a nice, pretty package with a bow on top and just say, here, implement the facade. Here's the API you need to talk to. Here's the front-end app. It'll work as long as its endpoint is there. Or better yet, could we give you the facade? Could we give you a secure, well-tested, highly performing back-end API that, once again, you can just plug in? Or full stack. Why don't we just give you everything? Here's a facade. Here's our front-end app. All you have to do is make sure the facade is querying the right S-Force objects, make sure that it can talk, make sure the API user's there, make sure it's secured. You can just press a button after you configure it, send it off to Heroku. You got a back-end API. Same thing with front-end. Press this button, off to Heroku. You can decide to group them together. That's our perfect solution. Our perfect solution is apps that are so great, our customers want to use them, and apps that are so modular, so well written, that you can just have them. You don't have to go in there and rewrite a big piece of it. It just works for you. So that's where Salesforce IT is going. That's what's on our mind. And this is how we build apps. We evolve. We don't have one way of doing things. We have the best way of doing things. Whatever works. It's Angular today. It might be famous tomorrow. Maybe there's something else coming out that we'll check out. Thank you. I believe this is the Q&A part as well. Yeah.
Changing the technologies so rapidly, how do you resist being jack of all trades and master of none?
So the question was, how do we resist being a jack of all trades and master of none if we're constantly switching technologies? That's definitely an issue. When we switch technologies, we try to make a gradual change. So if we go from Angular to React, it's still JavaScript. Right? It's just learning some new mechanisms. We put lots of time into it. That's how we prevent being just kind of a jack of all trades. But there are times where we realize we didn't do that right, or we could have done it better. We kind of rigged it to work. But we're constantly reevaluating what we've done, not just work done, check, see you later. We're constantly coming back and saying, is that good? Is that following our JavaScript style guide? Is that following an Angular style guide? Is that really using Angular the best we can use it? Or is there maybe a custom piece that we need to add to Angular to make all of this easier for us? So it's just that constant reevaluation that helps us not become a jack of all trades. Sure.
The Salesforce1 API is JavaScript, web view-based.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the kind of cooler apps we start to see use some specific piece of hardware on the phone. So camera, QR code scan, or new sensors or imaging scanner.
Mm-hmm.
Can you add native modules to Salesforce1?
You can indeed. So Salesforce1 is a hybrid app built with Cordova or PhoneGap or something like that. And so we are making pieces of that available, such as GPS and camera. I'm not sure the exact state or exactly which ones are available right now, but that is what they're working towards.